Okay, so we're going to be talking about writing the slope-intercept form from a table. Now, previously we looked at finding slope from a table, and we're just going to be adding to those steps, building on what we've already talked about on being able to write y equals mx plus b, except we're going to need to find our m, our slope from the table, as we've looked at previously. And then we're going to find b, very similar to how we found b in other examples, where we're just going to pick an x and a y to plug into our equation, solve for b, and then write our equation, okay? Now, just like we found slope from our previous tables, we know that slope is our rise over run, or change in y over the change in x, okay? Now, just like we found slope previously from the tables, we can find the change as we go along, and then take our change in the y over our change in the x, and that would be our slope. Well, let's just find what the change in the y would be. What would I have to add to a -1 to get to 0? Well, plus 1, right? So my change in y here would be plus 1. What do I have to add or subtract to get from 0 to 1? Well, I'm still adding 1, right? And then from 1 to 2, I'm still adding 1. So my change in y over here is a plus 1. Okay, let's find the change in x. Okay, what do I have to add or subtract to get from -3 to from -6 to -3? Well, I have to add 3, right? -6 plus 3 gets me to -3. What do I have to add or subtract to get from -3 to 0? Again, I'm having to add 3. -3 plus 3 gives me 0, and from 0 to 3 it's plus 3. So my change on the x side, I have to add 3. So my slope, which is change in the y over the change in the x, would be a positive 1 over a positive 3. In other words, 1/3. Now that's just the slope. We still need to write the entire equation. So like I said, you can pick any x, any y, as long as it's consistent from our table, and we can plug those into our x and y over here, and then solve for b. Well, let's go with, how about 3, 2? Let's go with 3, 2 over here, okay? Let's use this as our x and use this as our y. So looking at y equals mx plus b, okay, we can plug in 2 for our y, since it's our y, 2 for our y. We know our slope is 1/3, and let's plug in 3 for our x, okay? Now again, if we're multiplying fractions here, we can think of it as multiply by the numerators and divide by our denominator. So this is really 1 times 3 divided by 3. 1 times 3 divided by 3. Well, what's 1 times 3? 3 divided by 3 is 1. And now another shortcut way, if you didn't catch up on this, is notice we could just cancel these out and we'd be left with 1. But either way, we get 2 equals 1 plus b, okay? Now, to get b by itself, we have a positive 1, subtract 1 from both sides. And over on this side, I'm going to write it 2 minus 1 is 1. So we get 1 equals b. Okay? So now I have an m and I have a b. So writing our equation, it would be y equals m, which is 1/3, x plus b. b is a positive 1. So this would be my answer. Okay? Let's try one more like that. It says write the function rule for this model. Well, let's first find our change in y. What do I have to add or subtract from 11 to get to a -1? Okay, what do I have to add or subtract from a -11 to get to -1? Well, don't I have to subtract 12? Okay, so 11 plus a -12, or you can think 11 minus 12 gets me to a -1. And then a -1 to a -13, that's also minus 12. And then from a -13 to a -25, that's also a -12. Okay, so a -13 minus 12 gets me to -25. So my change in y is a -12. Okay, let's find our change of x. From a -2 to a positive 1, what would I have to add or subtract to that to get a positive 1? Well, I have to add 3, right? Then what's 1, or what added or subtracted to 1 gets you to 4? Plus 3. Okay, and then from 4 to 7, it's also plus 3. So my change of x is a positive 3. So my slope, change in y over change of x, okay, is a -12 over 3, or we can think of it as -12 divided by 3 is -4. So I have a slope, I need to find b. Well, again, we can pick any x, any y we want to plug in. Maybe we want to plug in 1, -1, because 1s are always nice to work with. And let that guy be our x, 1 be our x, and let the -1 be our y. So plugging it into the equation, y equals mx plus b, y would be a -1. My slope would be a -4. Well, actually, let's just leave that out of the parentheses for now. -4 times x, which is 1, plus b. Well, the nice thing about using 1 is because a -4 times 1 is just going to be -4. So you'd have a -1 equals a -4 plus b. Well, how do I move the -4 over? I have to add it to both sides, right? So I'm kind of running out of room here, but I'm going to try to write it out here. If I add 4 to a -1, what am I going to get? 3. So I get 3 equals b. Okay? A -1 plus 4 gives me 3. So now I have my m and I have my b. So writing my equation, I'd have y equals a -4, that's my slope, x plus b, which is 3. Okay? So my equation is y equals a -4x plus 3. Now the last example I want to look at, which is similar to something that you're going to come across in the assessments here, is it says a towing service charges an initial fee of $8. So remember when we were talking about the word problems, we always said the initial or starting fee was our what? B, the y-intercept, right? And then it charged an additional fee of $2 per mile. What do we say the keyword per represents? Slope. So right away, we already know they're telling us what B is and what they're telling us our M is, okay? Now, we could use that. We could use that in and of itself to write the equation, but we'll come back to that in a second. So we have a towing service. They charge you $8 just to get towed, then an additional $2 for every mile they have to travel. We want to write the function rule that models the situation, then graph the points, okay? Now, let's go ahead and use what we have been doing with the table, and then I want to show you just from the word problem, we could have gotten the same thing, okay? So we know that we can find our change in y. We have x's over here, y's over here, okay? Find our change in y. What do I have to add or subtract from 8 to 10? Well, I have to add 2, right? What do I have to add or subtract from 10 to 12? I'm adding 2. And I'm also adding 2, right? So my change in y is 2. What is my change of x? Well, I have to add 1, or from 0 to 1, so I have to add 1 to get to there. I have to add 1 from 1 to 2. And then I have to add 1 from 2 to 3. So my change in y is the change of x, okay? My slope is 2 over 1, which is 2. So my slope is 2. Now, we could have gotten that from the word problem itself. They told us a towing service charges an initial fee of $8. Remember, what we start with is B, and an additional fee of $2 per mile. Keyword per telling me my slope. So notice, they told us the slope in the equation, which was, or in the word problem, which was 2. So either way, we're getting our slope is 2 here. Okay, and this table makes sense. If I go 0 miles, they charge us $8 from the get-go. 1 mile adds on $2, so $8 turns into 10. 2 miles adds on another additional $2, so it go to 12, and so on. So now that we know our slope, let's write our equation. Well, again, we could just use b here. We would know that b is 8, but let's go ahead and see if we can use our equation and points to get 8 as well. Okay, so let's check to make sure that we get our b is 8. Let's pick 0 and 8 to be my point. So let x be 0 and let y be 8. If that's the case, my y is going to be 8, my m is 2, and my x is 0. Okay, so with that in mind, plugging this in, we have 2 times 0 is 0. So I get 8 is 0 plus b. Well, is 0 plus b, is that really anything I need to write? I could subtract 0 over, but I'm still going to get 8. So really, we just get 8 is b, okay? Which is nice. Another connection here. Notice, this is the point 0.8. Didn't we say that our y-intercept is always going to be in this form? So even if we look at it this way, we still get that this guy is our b, okay? So there's multiple ways we just showed that this guy is b, that 8 is b. So our equation here is y equals m, which is 2, x plus 8. 2 and 8, okay? Now, what they want us to do is graph our points to kind of show how things changed over time, okay? So X is our number of miles towed, so let's label our axis number of miles towed. And our Y is going to be our total cost. Total cost. Okay, let's just label our axes to make this kind of nicer. So if we're going number of miles towed, we can just go by ones, where this guy is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And then let's go by twos over here. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Okay, well, if I'm going 0 miles just to get there, notice our point. If I go 0 miles, it's $8. So my first point is going to be 0, 8. Then if I went 1 mile, it's 110. 2 miles is 212. And 3 miles is 314. Okay, so plotting our points, we kind of get this guy. Okay, and notice it kind of, even though I'm hand drawing this, we get that kind of that linear idea here, that linear line going through here. Okay, but they only asked us to plot the points, so that would be what it would look like graphing our points. Okay.